The auction yard smelled of dust, sweat, and old sin, the kind that clung to a place long after men convinced themselves it was normal. Cattle pens lined the horizon, but the real business happened near the wooden platform where women were sold like broken horses, their names erased, their pasts ignored. She stood there barefoot, wrists bruised from rope, her dress torn not by violence but by neglect, clutching the thin hand of her baby brother as if her grip alone could keep him alive. When the auctioneer barked prices, she didn't cry. Tears had become useless months ago. She stared straight ahead, jaw tight, spine straight, daring the world to finish what it had already started. Then the rancher arrived. Elias Crowe wasn't loud. He didn't shove forward or spit or joke like the others. He stood at the edge of the crowd, tall, weather-cut, eyes like a man who'd buried more than he talked about. When the bidding reached a price that made the crowd restless, he raised his hand once. No flourish, no grin. The hammer fell. The woman finally looked at him, and what came out of her mouth shocked everyone. "You paid for me," she said flatly, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Now do it!" Laughter rippled through the men. Someone whistled. Elias didn't smile. He walked forward, lifted her brother into his arms, and covered the child's ears with his calloused palm. "That's not how this ends," he said. The ride to the ranch was silent except for the wind. She waited for the moment his hand would reach for her, the moment she would have to disappear inside herself to survive again. Instead, when they arrived, he cut the ropes, handed her a blanket, and pointed to the house. "You eat. You sleep. Nobody touches you," he said. She didn't believe him. She had learned that kindness was just cruelty that took longer. That night she slept with her back to the wall, knife hidden under straw, heart hammering at every sound. Days passed. Elias kept his distance. He fed them, clothed them, hired a woman from town to help the child. Rumors spread fast on the frontier, and by the end of the week, men were riding out to see the rancher who bought a woman and didn't claim her. One night, over a simple supper, she finally broke. "Why?" she asked. Elias stared into his coffee. "Because someone once paid for my mother," he said. And nobody stopped it. Silence filled the room. Outside, coyotes howled. Inside, something dangerous and unfamiliar began to grow: hope. But hope in the Wild West was a risky thing. The town didn't like unanswered questions, and men who broke unspoken rules paid for it, as threats began to circle the ranch like wolves. Elias knew one thing: buying her had been easy. Protecting her would cost him everything. And if you're still listening right now, this is the moment to subscribe. Because what happens next changes. All their lives forever. The trouble came at dawn, carried on hooves and hatred. Men from town rode up armed with smiles. That didn't reach their eyes. They spoke of contracts, expectations, of how money bought silence and bodies. She stood behind Elias, her brother gripping her skirt, ready to run or fight or die if needed. When one man laughed and said she owed them obedience, Elias stepped forward, shotgun resting casually on his shoulder. "She doesn't owe anyone a damn thing," he said. The air went cold. Words turned into threats, threats into drawn weapons, and in a heartbeat the yard exploded with violence. When the dust settled, 2 men were wounded, 1 fled, and the message was clear. From that day on, she wasn't property. She was protected. But protection brought consequences. The sheriff came. Papers were demanded. Questions asked. Elias did the unthinkable. He rode to town and married her. No church, no celebration. Just ink, witnesses, and a vow spoken so quietly only they heard it. "This isn't ownership," he said. "This is armor." She didn't know how to be a wife. She flinched at kindness, mistrusted warmth, waited for punishment that never came. Elias never touched her without permission, never raised his voice. Slowly, painfully, she began to breathe again. Her brother grew strong, laughed, slept without nightmares. One night, months later, she stood on the porch watching the sun bleed into the plains and realized she wasn't afraid anymore. When she turned, Elias was there, hat in hand. "I won't keep pretending," he said. "I care for you. But you choose what comes next." She stepped toward him. Not because she was bought, not because she owed him, but because she wanted to. The past didn't vanish. Scars never do. But the future opened like land after a storm. Years later, The ranch stood as proof that something good could rise from something cruel. Travelers spoke of a rancher who defied the rules, of a woman who survived the unthinkable, of a family forged not by purchase but by choice. And if this story moved, if you believe redemption belongs even in the darkest places, subscribe to this channel, because these Wild West archives are more than stories. They are reminders that humanity survived even when the world tried to kill. Peace on the frontier was never permanent. It was borrowed time, paid for in vigilance and blood, and Elias Crowe understood that better than most. Years passed, but the past did not stay buried. The land prospered, the cattle multiplied, and the ranch became a quiet refuge spoken about in low, respectful tones, yet the same men who once laughed at an auction never truly forgot the insult of a rule broken. One autumn evening, as the sky burned red and gold, a stranger rode in, clean coat, city manners, eyes sharp as a knife. He brought papers claiming ownership. Tracing her past like a chain dragged across the floor, she felt the old fear rise, the instinct to shrink. But this time she didn't. She stood beside Elias, hand steady, voice calm, and told the man the truth. She had been bought, yes, but she had also been freed, married and reborn. The stranger smiled thinly and warned them that the world didn't forgive people who embarrassed it. That night the ranch was attacked. Fire leapt through dry grass, gunshots cracked the dark, and for a moment it felt like history repeating itself. But history had changed its mind. Neighbors rode in. Workers stood their ground. The woman who once waited to be broken now loaded a rifle and protected her family. By dawn, the attackers were gone, and the ranch still stood. The sheriff returned, this time not with questions, but with respect. The papers were burned. The past finally lost its grip. Months later, a child was born, a living answer to everything the frontier had tried to destroy. As Elias held the baby, he realized something that would one day become legend. The moment he refused to treat a human life like property, he had rewritten his own fate. And the woman, once sold, once silent, looked out over the land and knew she was no longer surviving history. She was shaping it. If this final chapter proved anything, it was this. Even in the cruelest eras, courage could change the ending. And if you believe stories like this deserve to live on, subscribe to the channel. Because the Wild West wasn't just built on violence, it was redeemed by people who dared to say no.